welcome everyone to Sunday School once again this morning. Again, I trust everyone's had a good weekend so far. Brother Paul Boudreau, would you mind opening our class with prayer for us this morning, please? And today we're continuing in our quarter study on parables of Jesus. Getting to be quite a few lessons on this. I remember the first time we went through this quarter, I was like, man, there's that many parables? But this is the second actual quarter, and it's our 8th lesson on this title. Today we're looking at the parable of the talents. And if we kind of link it a little bit with the last lesson. We really can't argue with the fact that we should be in a state of expectancy for Christ. In the last lesson, we talked about the 10 virgins being ready, being prepared. In the case of that parable, they were looking forward to the wedding. And it was because of a lack of preparation or proper preparation that half of them ended up being called foolish. So if the conclusion of last week's lesson was watching, be ready, be watching, then this lesson moves us a step further into working, watching and working. So to me, they kind of go together. When you read them in the text in Matthew 25, they are back to back. There's no space in between them. So if you want to keep that in mind as we're looking at it, we looked last week at watching and being prepared. Now we're looking at working to be prepared. So today in our lesson, the implication is that everyone should be in the state of work and business and taking care of every opportunity that God provides them while we're here. We're not here just to be here. We're here for a purpose. What's the purpose? It's to serve God and to further His kingdom in this world. Excuse me a second here. So we've got to learn to work while it's day. We realize we've only have one life to give. And that's what's expected, by the way. We give our lives to the Lord, and there's only one, you get one shot at it, basically. So since only what we do for Christ is going to last, then similar to last week, we become foolish if we're not giving our very best. All that matters for eternity is Christ. What did you do for Christ? What did you do for His kingdom? Those are things which will be here. We all know there's going to be a day coming. It's going to be tried by fire. The wood, the hay, and the stubble's all going to burn up. All right? The stuff that's going to be left is of eternal value. So in our lives, we should discipline ourselves to continually be working until Jesus comes, knowing that when He comes is also the day of accountability. That's when we're going to give an account for what we've been doing. So if you're in Matthew chapter 25, this is the parable for today. Matthew 25:14. For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods. And unto one of them he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to every man according to his several ability, and straightway took his journey. Then he that had received the 5 talents went and traded with the same and made them other 5 talents. And likewise he that had received 2, he also gained other 2. But he that had received 1 went and digged in the earth and hid his Lord's money. After a long time the Lord of those servants cometh and reckoneth with them. And so he that had received 5 talents came and brought other 5 talents, saying, Lord, thou deliveredst unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 talents more. His Lord said unto him, Well done, thy good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. He also that had received the 2 talents came and said, Lord, thou deliveredst unto me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 other talents besides them. His Lord said unto him, Well done, thy good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. Then he which had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew thee that thou art a hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. And I was afraid, and I went and hid thy talent in the earth. Lo, there thou hast, that is thine. His Lord answered and said unto him, Thou wicked and slothful servant, thou knewest that I reap where I sowed not, and gather where I have not strawed. Therefore oughtest thou to have put my money to the exchangers, and then at my coming I should have received mine own with usury. Take therefore the talent from him, and give it unto him which hath 10 talents. For unto every one that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance. But from him that hath not shall be taken away even that which he hath. And cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Keep in mind, again, as we keep looking at this parable, not just continuing last week, but one of the points we did bring out last week too, is the parable is about Christians, God's people. It's not about the world. The 10 virgins didn't represent the 5 from the world and the 5 that knew the Lord. They all knew the Lord. They all should have been ready. These servants are whose servants? Oh, come on. Y'all had to be listening. We read it at the beginning. They're the Lord's servants. They're his. The servants are the Lord. It says he who called his own servants. So again, we're not talking about those that don't serve the Lord versus those that do. We're talking about those who say they serve the Lord. So the master is no doubt Christ. The servants are his servants, are Christians. It's important to note also that the talents were his. He gave them his talents to them. They didn't belong to them, it belonged to the master. So it's fair to say when the reference is made of Christ as a man in the parables traveling to a far country, that it's speaking of him returning to heaven. That would be a fulfillment of what Paul wrote in Ephesians 4:8. Last part of that verse says, when he ascended up on high, he led captivity captive and gave gifts unto men. So this parable in real life, when Christ went to heaven, he gave gifts to men when he left. He's coming back. What have you done with what he left you while he was gone? That'll bring us to our first point we want to look at in the parable is the gifts and talents themselves. In our society, we throw around this term quite a bit. I hear this all the time, especially being in the music world all the time. We hear people say, he's got such God-given talent. That's a God-given talent. We throw that kind of around loosely. Maybe we shouldn't be throwing it around quite so loosely. We throw it around like, okay, he's just good because he has God-given talent and move on. For today, we have to see it as a lot more serious than something we should just be joking about or making light of, that God-given talent. It is God-given talent. If we will see them as God-given, then we'll treat them with more respect and handle the use of them more seriously. It is just as serious a mistake to say, I have no talents. As the one in the lesson said, the one with the 1 talent, I knew thee that thou art a hard man. The implication for him is, I can't do anything with it. I don't have any ability. That's as serious a mistake as taking lightly the ability that you know that you have. So the first thing we should see is the trust that the master has to call on his servants to give them his goods. God trusts you, or he wouldn't have given you talents. He wouldn't have given you of his possessions if he didn't trust you to be able to do something with those possessions. Again, the idea that I don't have any talent for the Lord, he wouldn't have gave you stuff if you couldn't do something. The second thing we must see is the reason that he gave them was so that they could put the talents to work. They could use them. It wasn't just for them to have. They were to use that to create something else with it. So it seems fair after careful consideration of the parable, and also if we keep in mind the parable of the workers in the field. We studied that a few lessons back, how they came in the first of the morning, after 3 hours, at lunchtime, after lunch, right before even they still were hired. Consider that parable along with this one. Christ is not going to allow any servant that's willing to work to sit around idle. He has stuff to do. We have stuff to do. He has something for everyone to do, And this would be part of the reason that he left them something to work with. He gave them talents because he has something for them to do. They use what he's given them to accomplish what he's called them to do. It all works together. He's not going to call you to do something and not give you what you need to do it. Someone has said that the only thing that you and I can ever call our own is our sin. I would tend to agree with that. That's pretty much the only thing that we make. We sin, and we can't blame that on anybody else. It's only us. The truth is, everyone will be without excuse, and it should easily be seen here. Our Master has given unto us all everything that we need to carry out the duties that he's required of us. This surely gives a new meaning to what Paul said. He wrote it in Philippians 4:19. But my God shall supply all your needs according to his riches in glory by Christ Jesus. He's given us things that we need to work for him. There's where we lose things. We think, we, not necessarily us personally, but mankind in general, thinks God gave us stuff because he likes us. I'm not saying he doesn't like us, but we didn't do anything. God just didn't say, oh yeah, you're a great guy. Here, take some money, take some of this, take some of that. Here, just have it. It's all free. That's not what it's for. It's for his kingdom to be furthered in this world. Whatever the Lord's called us to do, the words I can't or I couldn't are not going to be accepted. In reality, we are receiving from Christ all that we are going to need to do what he's called us to do. Years ago in my band room, I had a sign on my wall that said, try harder. And the kids would say, I just can't do it. I'm like, yeah, you can. No, I can't. I'm like, no, you just ain't trying. Oh, I'm trying. Well, then try harder. You can do it. I mean, in my mind, if you wanted to learn how to play the trumpet, I told you what you need to do to be able to play the trumpet. I've told hundreds of kids what they need to play the trumpet, and they can do it, so can you. God says, I need you to do this, and we want to say I can't. He's got hundreds of people that do what he says all the time. He's got more than hundreds, but over the ages, I mean, y'all do know in eternity there's going to be a lot of people there, right? That means a lot of people did what God told them to do. That means you can. We can if you want to. It's not a can't, it's I don't want to. So again, we've got what we need. Heaven is filled with all kinds of spiritual blessing, and if we'll allow the Lord help us to see and understand that, it will cause the scriptures to even come more to light for us. When Jesus left, he made sure that whatever was going to be needed by his church would be available. John 14:12. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believeth on me, the works that I do shall he do also, and greater works than these shall he do, because I go to my Father. He knows that we can do what we're called to do. He's going to his Father. He's there now, interceding for us, helping us, supplying us with what we need to get done what he wants us to do. It gives a lot of authority and meaning to the commission to lay hands on the sick, to raise the dead, to cast out the devil. None of it's in us. All of it is in the power of Christ. Jesus gave the talents. They're his. Understanding that Christ is going to give to some more than he does to others will also help us a lot. Some he gave 5, some he gave 2, some he gave 1. You notice there's no mention of nobody getting any. Everybody got what they could deal with. So it is God who places each member in the body as it pleases him. It pleased the Lord in the parable to give this guy 5. The same pleasure was derived by giving this guy 1. We worry too much about they got and he got and I don't got. Forget about all that. You've got what God wants you to have. You've got what you need from God to do what God wants you to do. I don't want to say be content too much, because sometimes the church has been lulled to sleep by being content, but we need to be content with what God gave us. He gives to every man according to his ability. Another thing that is vital in our relationship with God in this area is realizing that it's divine providence that made the difference in our lives. Divine providence made the difference between 5 talents and 2 talents and 1 talent. none of it really is anything special that we did. It's God's will that gives us the talents as He wills. You're not going to make a deal with the Lord and do something to get more talents. He's already given you what you can handle. He's given you what you can use. This is why as Christians in this world, with all the craziness going on around us, we can do more, we can put up with more, we can accomplish more for the Lord when we realize we've got what we need. It also helps us to see that investments and experiences throughout this lifetime will give us the faith to do more. I mean, God, I got to tell you, when I was a little kid, if God would have showed me some stuff I was going to be doing when I got older, I'd have been scared out of my mind. I'd have been like, how in the world is that going to happen? There's no way I could do it. But He didn't tell me all that. I did this. I was faithful in that. And He goes, hey, yeah, good job. Now look, now come on and do this. Oh, that's what I needed you to do. Now look, because you did that, that opened the door to do this. And just keep going through the doors. Keep stepping through. That brings us, so the talents, that's our first. The second one of our points is the rewards of well-doing. It would not be a bad thing if we set a personal goal to hear the Lord say, well done. I've heard lots of preachers preach along that idea. Well done. That's what you want to hear when the end comes. That accountability, that judgment day is coming. And some people are going to hear well done, and some people are going to say, I don't even know who you are. We got to realize that would have to be pleasing words. I don't know if much more we could hear more pleasing than that. Then the next part that we want to hear is, again, that's a joyful sound, but what about hearing, well done, thou good and faithful servant, enter into the joy of the Lord? Now we're even moving along a further line of things. You think about a joyful sound to hear that. That's better than being announced the winner of the track race, or a successful candidate, or being called the boss or the CEO, or being Miss America or Your Honor or Mr. President or the King or the Queen. None of that's going to compare to, well done, thy good and faithful servant. And how is that accomplished? Look back in the parable, which again, it's an earthly story, but it lays a heavenly meaning here. How did the 5 talents, the 2 talents arrive at, well done, thy good and faithful servant? It's because they immediately applied themselves to the business at hand. They got to work. Since every Christian has a lot to do and not a lot of time to do it, then we got to be busy about the Master's business. I mean, if this lifetime is that fast in all of eternity, that's not very long. It seems long to us because we're bound by the constraints of time and thing right here, but in eternity is not bound by the constraints of time. This is just a blink. That's not long to get it done. Do we approach what we have to do for the Lord realizing it's that fast? If you are in the class today and you're not active working in the kingdom, then stir up the gifts that are in you and get busy. During the loss of loved ones, when we go to funerals and things, we hear people say things like this: if I had just known, I would have done this or that. Well, if you think that's a regret, just wait until you stand in front of Jesus when He comes back. If I'd have just known, this is just me and my thoughts, the very best of the best are probably still going to be saying, wow, I missed it. I could have done way more. If the best of the best is going to think that, what are you going to be saying? I mean, we always want to compare ourselves to everybody else. Okay, compare yourself then. What are you going to be saying standing in front of the same judge that Paul's standing in front of? What are you going to say? Again, since there is obviously a law of God that everything will reproduce itself, then all you and I have to do to become Christ-like is to become Christ-like, and then we will become active in making disciples. We'll become active in reproducing that Christ-like spirit in others by presenting Christ in us, through us, to the world. Even if most of the signs of the coming of the Lord have been fulfilled, which in my opinion, everything that needs to be done has already been done. He could come at any moment. You listen to what He told the disciples. He could have came 2,000 years ago. Everything's done, but we can't afford to let up right at the door. He's still not here. So there's something somewhere, somebody, look, I don't know, I've heard lots of sermons on that line too. When the last one gets saved, I can't remember who preached that, but that was the title of the lesson. I was like, buddy, that's going to be a day. And that day's coming. So there's always a need for good works that come from those who are in tune with heaven and the kingdom. That'll bring us to the third point of our lesson, the regret of being unfaithful. We saw the 5. The 5 got 5, made 5 more, got 10. The 2, he got more. Well done, come into the joy of the Lord, all of that. Fact is, the one who got 5 and made 10 got 11 because he got the one from the other guy, the one who was unfaithful. If everyone had done as that servant, the one with the 1 talent, and buried their talent, the ground would have had 8 talents in it when the Lord came back. That's what would have happened. There'd have been 8 talents buried in the ground if all of them had done that. Take a moment and look at some possibilities that could influence us to be unfaithful with the talent that God's given us. I got like 4 things that sometimes can get in the way. Number 1, the guy with the 1 talent. He could have been jealous of the others. He got 5. What's so special about him? And he got 2. I don't even like him. I only got 1. Or think back to the parable of the workers in the field. We worked 8 hours out here for the same pay that they got. They only worked an hour. We jealous. We worried about all things. That could have caused this guy to just sit around and pout the whole time the master was gone. Anybody know anybody that goes to church and sitting around pouting? There are some, all right? We must all remind ourselves that unto whomsoever much is given, of him shall be much required, and to whom men have committed much, of him they will ask the more. I mean, anybody besides me at work, notice that if you're the one who does the job right, you're the one who does what you're supposed to do, who does the boss call when he needs to do something else? He calls you. Sometimes that can be aggravating. I remember I changed schools. I'd been at one school for about 12 years, and they had me doing everything. I'm doing the band, I'm the Quiz Bowl sponsor, I'm the Beta Club sponsor, I'm the homecoming parade coordinator, I'm the teacher evaluation helper, I'm doing everything under the sun. I moved schools. I made up my mind when I moved. I said, I am not telling this principal that I know how to do nothing. I'm the band director. That's it. I don't know how to do anything. We had a whole bunch of new teachers that year, and I was trained to be a mentor teacher, which they're looking for that. I didn't tell him I was trained for that. He asked, he said, everybody who's mentor trained, send me an email because we've got 20 new teachers here and I need to have enough mentors. I'm like, I'm not telling him. I'm not. 2 weeks after that, he calls me in the office. He goes, you do know they give me a list of everybody who's mentor trained, right? I'm like, great. He said, so for my good work, he decided that he would treat me good. Everybody else got 1 to mentor. He gave me 3 because he had too many. So I guess this is what happens sometimes. But think about this. With all that in mind, look at the situation. He who has but 1 talent buries the one he has. Not a good choice. Second thing that could have influenced him, maybe he wasn't jealous, maybe he was afraid. He kind of said he was. Analyze this. Your master trusts you with his monies, and you are afraid that if you use it, you're going to lose it. You do know that just the opposite's true. Use it or lose it is what happens. Sir Francis Bacon, he's an English lawyer. I don't know a whole lot about this guy, but I read a little bit about him. I studied him some in history and all that. I think I would have liked him. But here's what his philosophy was. Money is like manure, good for nothing in a big heap. You have to spread it around. I think I like his sense of humor, if nothing else. The same is true of spiritual gifts. They become of no value to those who possess them and refuse to use them. Anybody ever had the Lord tell them to do something big, and you're like, it can't be me. I can't do it. I learned my lesson years and years ago. God, I know God would send me go pray for that lady over there because she's sick, and if you go pray for her, she's going to be healed. Lord, I can't go pray for that lady. They'll think I'm a lunatic. She's sick, like she's going to die in a couple of weeks. And I go pray for her and she dies and everybody's going to be laughing at me. I literally, that's what I'm thinking. While I'm sitting there doing that, some guy way in the back gets up and goes and prays for her. She got healed and recovered and lived another 20 years after that. I missed it because I was burying the talent. Because I didn't realize when God said go pray for her, he gave me what I needed to pray for, and I buried the talent. I didn't use it. So I lost it. Third thing he could pray, not just fear or jealousy, maybe he just became idle. The fact that the other servants were busy should have stimulated this servant to become active, but instead he became idle. Maybe he just, I got too much to do for that. I'm going to go bury that over there so that I make sure I still have it when he comes back. He'll be mad at me if I lose. I'm going to stick it over there. And then he went around doing his business. He was idle in the kingdom's business because he was busy in his business. Lastly, and we should let this ring loud and clear here, for those who choose to do nothing, realize that there is still a day of reckoning. You're going to account for doing nothing. Don't be jealous of other people. Don't be fearful that you can't do it. The God gave you what you had, what you need. Rather, we can learn from the 5 and the 2 talents in the parable. We can learn from them to do what you can do. Here's one thing I do know, even as a little bitty kid, I grasp this concept pretty good. God would be foolish to ask you to do something that you cannot do. You know, I'm sorry, don't fault me. I like to read these sci-fi adventures, Knights and Dragons and all that. I like to read that kind of stuff. Maybe not, I don't know. But anyway, in those kind of things, though, they send them off on foolish quest, which there's no way you're going to be able to do it. God doesn't send you on quests like that. If God sends you on a quest, guess what? You have exactly what you need to get it done. It's not even going to be close. You're just going to plow right through it exactly like God wanted you to do. The world may look at the situation and think it ain't going too good, but they don't see what you see. Do we see through Christ's eyes what the task is and what he's given us? If you see what he gave you and you see what he wants you to do, it's like, oh, okay, I got this. I'm ready. Let's go. And God takes care of it and you just go do it. That'll bring us to the fourth point that it's good to remember. I will have to say that there are a few things that will do for us what being honest in our recollection of what God has done for us, in us and through us. Chances are, if you've been a Christian for more than a few months, he's done something in your life somewhere. When he calls on you to do something else, look back at what you've already accomplished. That's a good encouragement. If we can remember what he has given to us, then it helps us to know what is going to be expected from us. It's the favor of God that he would consider entrusting us with his goods. So the more we do for God, the more indebted we come to him for being used for his kingdom's work. We got it backwards. We think God's indebted to us because we did what he told us to do. That's the opposite way of looking at it. We're indebted to the Lord. We need to do what he told us to do. When you do something for the Lord, we're more indebted because he gave us the privilege of doing something for his kingdom. Whatever we have produced is evidence of the faithfulness that we've gained. Remember what you've already accomplished for the Lord, through the Lord. When we've been diligent about the master's business, we're showing our faith by our works. James taught that a faithful person is known by their works. You and I can be comforted knowing that we face a day of accountability. And if we've been faithful, sincere, honest, conscientious about our ministry and our hearts pure, that day of accountability is going to be favorable for us. For those that are faithful and honor God now, he will in turn honor them shortly. Go back to the time constraint again. Your life's this long. Whatever you're dealing with, God's going to get you through it right here and now. And on the other side of that, eternity with him is waiting. Whatever it is, look at what God entrusted you with. Look at what God wants you to do. You can see that you can do it. But even if you do find it burdensome, I guess, to some degree, I'm sure Paul did not enjoy being shipwrecked. I know he didn't like getting beat up all the time. None of that. But he was able to do all that because he had sight for the eternity when it was over. Be assured that your performance here on earth, if you're doing what God's told you to do, is going to be accepted. Anybody at work ever did your best and your boss still didn't accept it? No, I'm the only one that ever happened to. You do the best you can, you've done everything, and he's still mad because of something. God's not like that. You took what he gave you and you did what you can do with it. It will be accepted. If we do well with what we have, then we will be praised by the same. Nothing that is ever done for the Lord is unnoticed or unrewarded. That'll bring us to our fifth point, is God's rating system. No matter what your experiences has been, if you have a watchful eye, then you have already learned that God always does over and above what you can ask or think. Even in man's economy, if one is faithful over a few things, then he normally can be expected to become elevated to a higher level. You can see that in the natural world too. If you do your job, the boss is going to put you in charge of something else. Sometimes it's not as great a blessing as you think it is, but anyway, you get the idea. But God says by being faithful over a few, listen to that phrase again, being faithful over a few, he will make you ruler over many. That's a big distinction in words here. Take note that God will not make us faithful, nor can we make ourselves rulers. God's not going to make you do it, and you can't make yourself a ruler. We become rulers over many by first being faithful servants to the few. That pretty much would be Christ's example while he was on earth. To me, that's one of the main reasons he's washing their feet right before he goes to the crucifixion. He's a servant, but he's also Lord. We may be called upon to become the servant of everybody here on earth, but when we get to heaven, we're going to be a ruler. Whatever we are called on to do here on this earth, again, called upon by God to do, it will be very little compared to the joy that is set before us. Whatever time it takes to accomplish will be very small compared to eternity. I know I've said this a couple times. My dad used to, I'd complain to him, so-and-so did that, and he did this at school, and I'd be griping. Stop. Listen, son, 100 years from now, nobody's even going to remember that. Now, he was doing it kind of, of course, everybody would be dead by then, but the point still hits home. In eternity, they're only going to remember what you did for Christ, and Christ is going to be the one doing the remembering. Christ is going to be doing the rewarding. It'll be there. All the rest of this stuff, just follow the plan. Follow God's directions. That'll bring us to our sixth point, is to enter thou into the joy of the Lord. This will have to be the second best thing you'll ever hear. If you and I have fallen in love with the Lord, if we've been faithful in our labors of love, then we have had the best that this life has to offer. But it doesn't stop there. If you and I thought that was good, living this life for the Lord, which it is good, if I took a minute and asked for testimonies about that, I'm pretty sure most everybody in this room can say living for the Lord's good. Wait till you see the eternal joy that he has to offer. Far beyond that. The joy that he has purchased and provided. The joy of the redeemed. The joy that meets God's needs. The joy of becoming joint heirs with Christ. The idea that we can enjoy his own joy. A person cannot please God by playing it safe or trying to live safely. Being too careful produces laziness. It is in Paul's instructions in Philippians 4, verse 6. Be careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. And the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Jesus Christ. Understand the context of those words, be careful for nothing. Under that context, we can expect the peace of God. A lot of people want the peace of God, but they don't want to be careful for nothing. Sometimes you have to do stuff that seems utterly ridiculous to you because the ways of this world are foolishness. God confounded the wise with the foolishness of the Scriptures. Well, guess what? Be careful for nothing. If God's called you to do it, don't worry about it. Go do it. Think about this. The peace of God can keep our hearts and minds through Jesus Christ. You're not going to be able to live in safety all the time and learn how to live by faith. If you're going to live by faith, you're going to have some reason to need faith. If you don't test your faith, then is it really faith? There's got to be something out there. Hebrews 11:6 says, "But without faith it is impossible to please him, for he that cometh to God must believe that he is his, and is a rewarder of them that seek him." Notice this, I read from Philippians 4:6, but the second part of that verse reads like this. I'm going to read it again. "But in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God." So if we're going to be men and women of faith to the world that we're in, we will look like we are living by chance. But the truth is, those who are not living by faith and have buried their God-given talents are the ones who are taking a chance. They're taking a chance that he's not only the rewarder of them that seek him, but they're assuming that he's going to be the rewarder of them that do nothing for him. He is the rewarder of them that seek him. Everybody likes that part. But he's also the rewarder of those who are faithful to do what he told them to do. Look at again these servants. All three of these servants were his servants, the Lord's servants. The idea that he could reward us for doing nothing is a pretty big chance to take. But I also note for anyone to insinuate that God is a hard taskmaster, when Jesus said, "My yoke is easy, my burden is light," that becomes affront to God. There can well be a downward process that begins with hard thoughts about God, which leads to fear about God, followed by laziness, and ending in unfaithfulness, when all the time the earth is filled with God's goodness. Don't pay any attention to what the wicked think about God. We can take it a step further. Don't pay any attention to lazy people's thoughts about God. Those who do not pay their tithes are doing the same thing the unfaithful servant did. That is, they think they can do more with what belongs to God than God can. Again, I won't be preaching about tithes up here, but the tithe is the Lord's. It's not yours anyway. If you apply that to the parable, there's a talent he gave you. I don't have any talents. Yeah, you do. You got 10% of whatever income you have. That's a talent he gave you. Use it. Give it to God's kingdom. Bring it where it belongs. This is a lesson here. Anytime we have the wrong thoughts about God, ultimately you end up doing the wrong things. That's the servant with one talent. You're a hard man. You gather where you didn't straw. Well, that's some wrong thoughts and a bunch of assumptions about his Lord he's making. Anybody think God's a hard taskmaster? Anybody think God gathers where he didn't straw? I mean, how can he gather where he didn't straw? He strawed it all. It's all his anyway. Doing the right things comes as a direct result of proper knowledge and a relationship with God. Don't leave the lesson without realizing that our omissions in doing the things of our Lord are sins just as much as trespasses or commissions of sin that we have against him. He that is lazy about the work of God is kin to the ones who are busy about the devil's business. We got to realize it's possible to come complacent when in a hard place, instead of pressing in, looking up, and getting busy. People without a vision perish. We got to realize something's better than nothing. I got just probably enough time to look. In 2 Kings chapter 6, there's an interesting story that brings this out. So I'm going to just read a couple of places. It's in 2 Kings 6:24. It says, "And it came to pass after this that Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, gathered all his host and went up and besieged Samaria." So he's besieging the city. During the siege of the city, you can't buy nothing. Food's like almost gone. In 2 Kings chapter 7, it says this about that siege. Verse 3, "And there were 4 leprous men at the entering of the gate, and they said one to another, Why sit we here until we die? If we say we will enter into the city, then famine is in the city, and we shall die there. If we sit still here, we die also. Now therefore come and let us fall into the host of the Syrians. If they save us alive, we shall live. If they kill us, we shall but die." They're in a hopeless situation. The whole city is. Skip down a little bit in that 2 Kings verse 5. It says this, And they arose in the twilight and go into the camp of the Syrians. And when they were coming to the uttermost part of the camp of Syria, behold, there was no man there. For the Lord had made the host of the Syrians to hear a voice of chariots and a noise of horses, even the noise of a great host. And they said one to another, Lo, the king of Israel has hired the kings of the Hittites and the kings of the Egyptians to come upon us. Wherefore they arose and fled in the twilight and left their tents and their horses and their asses, even the camp as it was, and fled for their life. An impossible situation. These lepers sitting here, they're like, oh, we're going to die anyway. We might as well go over there. They went over there, and God had already won the battle. How many of y'all know the battle was won whether they win or not? And in 2 Kings 7:9, it says, Then said they one to another, We do not well this day of good tidings, and we hold our peace. If we tarry till the morning light, some mischief will come upon us. Now therefore come that we may go and tell the king's household. Now they're going to go tell the king. They're not going to keep it to themselves. To me, this is an analogy of an unfaithful Christian. The world's a mess. It's falling apart. You've sinned. You're all going to hell. There's no way out of it. And then you're like, well, I'm just going to go to God. I can't lose nothing. If he strikes me dead, he strikes me dead. When you go to him, he loves you, and he takes you, and he accepts you, and he wants you, and you can be part of his kingdom. What if you don't go tell everybody else? Even the lepers realized that. They could have just took everything and left. But they realized that it wouldn't be good. They need to bring good tidings to everyone. And then in 2 Kings 7:16, and the people went out and spoiled the tents of the Syrians. So a measure of fine flour was sold for a shekel, a measure of barley for a shekel, according to the word of the Lord. So the the lepers went and told everyone. Keep in this story, the Syrians were defeated whether the lepers went there or not. The Syrians were defeated whether the people in the city went out there or not. They all could have stayed in the city and died of famine. But somebody went to the Lord and found favor and then told everybody else. That's where we are. The man or the woman who is not used to reproduce and multiply the talents God gave them is like the person who didn't have anything to start with at all. The accountability will even be worse. Realize the destination of the most wicked person in the world is no different from the destination of the unfaithful servant. As far as eternity concerns, he was cast in outer darkness. There'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Out of the light of heaven, out from the joy of the Lord, out from the wedding, out from the feast, out from the presence of the Lord forever. They're just out. We got to be busy. We got to be reproducing our lives. Christ, introduce everybody else to him. He's in your heart, so it's not like you can't introduce him to somebody. You can show them by how your works are. They'll see Christ in you through the works you do for Christ's kingdom. Thank you all very much. I think I got it all in before the bell too. All right. See you all next Sunday.